Everyone, I'm very honored to welcome back into the studio Scott Ritter. Scott, we had a fantastic chat the first time, obviously talking about Russia and Ukraine, but things have shifted now, and this is a much bigger conflict given the global implications. And I think also the U.S. involvement. Obviously, Israel is a very strategic ally of the United States. Scott, I wanted to bring you in again to give everybody your insights and your detailed knowledge of Israel and Palestine, this conflict that has lasted for many, many decades. And I really want to get your assessment on the situation because I think at one point in your career, you were a very big supporter of Israel, but I think that's obviously certainly shifted now recently. So just please open up and let everybody know your initial thoughts on this conflict and where we are today.
Well, first of all, I think we need to acknowledge that this is a conflict that didn't just begin on October 7th, although that's the day that Hamas breached this wall that Israel had built surrounding Gaza. And I think we need to just reflect on this for a while. Gaza is an open-air concentration camp. Now, some Israelis might take umbrage at that. I don't care. It's time to just call things as they are. It's an open-air concentration camp where 2-point-something million Palestinians who are being denied any possibility of a normal life by the Israeli occupier or oppressor. They have been locked in there by the Israeli government. They're denied the ability to have an airport. They're denied the ability to have a port. Entrance and exiting there is tightly controlled by foreigners. The Palestinians don't have a right to dictate the terms of their own life. And life inside Gaza is extraordinarily unpleasant. It's poverty-stricken. There's no real hope for bettering one's existence. And so this has been going on for some time now. I mean, Gaza became an open-air prison almost immediately after Israel became a nation in 1948. If you study the events of that time, the Israelis had a policy of depopulating the Palestinian lands, the territories that were populated by Palestinian people, either killing them, and they killed thousands of them, or driving them out. And 700,000+ were ethnically cleansed in this manner, many of which were sent to Gaza, right. The first installation as an open-air prison. And since that time, there's been ebbing and flowing in terms of Israel and Gaza, et cetera. But recently, it has become a sticky point because Hamas, this organization, it labels itself a resistance organization. Israel, the United States, Europe, and others labeled it a terrorist organization. We just need to reflect that Samuel Adams and the Sons of Liberty were called terrorists by the British back before in the time of the American Revolution. Menachem Begin was a member of the Irgun organization that blew up the King David Hotel and killing hundreds of British, not just soldiers, but women, children. It was a terrorist organization, but the Israelis labeled them as freedom fighters. So it depends on your perspective. I would imagine that for the vast majority of the people living inside Gaza and many of the Arabs around the world, they don't view Hamas as a terrorist organization. We know that Recep Erdogan, the president of Turkey, certainly doesn't. He just gave a speech where he called them freedom fighters, mujahideen, people fighting for the cause of resistance against Israel. But, basically, the Palestinian people in recent times had their aspirations for nationhood put on the back burner. Some would even say that it's been taken off the stove altogether. So that's this larger geopolitical aspect of it. I think the geopolitics of the Middle East will be shaped by the issue of Palestinian statehood and everything that accrues with that. There's also the issue of military conflict. Israel was humiliated on October 7th. The level of humiliation has yet to be acknowledged by Israel and comprehended by the world. But let me put it this way. Israel is exposed as being a military that's incompetent, an intelligence organization that's not as good as everybody thought, and they were outfought by Hamas in the early hours of October 7th. But Scott, they took Israel by surprise. The whole purpose of the wall and the way Israel has postured its forces around Gaza is that they will never be taken by surprise. It is a permanent surveillance system. Hamas beat it, crushed it, destroyed it, humiliated Israel. And now Israel, in this humiliation, is seeking revenge. And I need to remind everybody, every single Israeli politician and general who speaks publicly today about this issue is a disgraced individual. We wouldn't be in this situation had they done their job. These are failed politicians, failed military leaders. So when they stand before you and speak in a very aggressive manner, just remember, they got beat on October 7th. Their job was to prevent that from happening, and they didn't do that. So now when you hear them thumping their chest and saying, we're going to exact revenge, take it with a grain of salt, because these people have proven their incompetence. Israel has mobilized over 300,000 reservists. Let's be clear who these reservists are. They are not combat-hardened troops. These are troops with a very minimal level of military training, and even the training they got was never used to full effect. Then they left the military. There's been no follow-on training. Now they're called back up, and they're being asked to go into the most difficult kind of warfare imaginable, urban warfare. And not just in a city, but a city that's been destroyed. Anybody who knows anything about urban warfare, you can track it from Stalingrad, through Monte Cassino to Bakhmut and Mariupol. When our experience in Mosul, when you blow up a city, you've made the job of defending the city that much easier, and you've made the job of attacking that much more difficult. And also keep in mind this, Hamas carried out a flawless attack on October 7th. It was professionally planned and executed. They didn't do that without having an end game, meaning that everything they did, from destroying the Israeli military capacity to kidnapping people and bringing them back into Gaza, was designed to enrage Israel so that Israel stops thinking rationally, and B, lure Israel into Gaza, knowing that the Israeli Air Force would bomb. Every bomb that hits Gaza is not killing Hamas. It's killing innocent Palestinians. Hamas is well below ground, not being impacted by these bombs because they thought about it beforehand. They know the weapon. They know what its effects are on the ground, and they've brought that in. The Israeli army right now is scared to death. These reservists don't have the training. They're scared to death. If they go in, they will be slaughtered.
So, Scott, I have a question. I mean, I think the attack from Hamas is a brutal attack, against innocent Israelis. And I think what we've seen is a huge outcry from, certainly the Western world, the United States and our allies, everyone standing very clearly with Israel. I mean, would you agree with this? Is that the rise of Hamas, I mean, they were democratically elected in 2006. Do you think that the reason for them being elected is simply the fact that these Palestinians felt no other option was left for them? The fact that they just didn't have a future, and so that they would resort to something of this extremism? I mean, I'm certainly under the belief that Hamas is definitely closer to a terrorist organization than a legitimate, freedom fighter. But I mean, certainly carrying out those attacks. But I can also understand that probably the conditions that Israel created for Palestine is the exact breeding grounds for an organization like Hamas to be democratically elected and to, go carry out those attacks.
So I am not going to accept the idea that Hamas on October 7th was a terrorist organization. They were carrying out a military assault, and they carried out with far more precision and far less collateral damage than what Israel's doing. If you're going to call Hamas a terrorist organization, then every single Israeli pilot that flies over Gaza today and indiscriminately drops bombs that have killed 6,500 Palestinian civilians, over 1,000 whom are children, then they are terrorists. And if they're terrorists, everybody who wears the green of the IDF is a terrorist, and every Israeli politician is a terrorist. And I think it's more accurate to call Israel the terrorist entity in this case than it is to say Hamas. I'm just saying that Israel's not an innocent party here. Benjamin Netanyahu is not an innocent party. Hamas, and they're running the show there. Now, they have a job of governance, and they are doing that, but they've never forgotten their resistance roots. I, again, ask everybody just to reflect on the reality that Gaza is an open-air concentration camp. If you lived in an open-air concentration camp, tell me what you would do. And if you say I would sit there and do nothing, you're a liar. Every single man worthy of the name would wake up every morning saying, how do I hurt them? Hurt the occupiers, hurt the people that have pinned me in. And they would be very receptive to the message of resistance that comes from Hamas.
So I want to kind of get your thoughts on this as far as, does the ground invasion happen? If they are to be moved from northern Gaza for this ground invasion, this is the innocent civilians we're talking about, where do they go? I mean, there's only one place that kind of makes sense, I guess, at least from the Israeli side. They're saying they could potentially go to the Sinai Peninsula, which is basically just a vast open desert. So I want to get your thoughts on this next phase here and what's now happening as Israel potential ground invasion is just a few days away. And what's really going to happen next?
Well, first of all, I just want to set the stage. Everything we're talking about is a war crime. Let's just be straight up honest about this. The concept of demanding that 1 million people leave their homes and move is a war crime. It's collective punishment. It's against the law. So anybody who sits there and says, we should consider, you're no better than the Nazis. You're no better than any war criminal that's ever existed. The fact that Israel is allowed to articulate this policy and not be held to account is stunning. The concept of collective punishment, which Israel has codified as official doctrine since 2006, is called the Dahawa doctrine, mowing the grass, is a war crime, a literal war crime. It's collective punishment. But nobody's saying anything. Everybody's just sitting there going, well, it's Israel, it's the Palestinians, it's normal. I guess it's normal for Israel to commit war crimes against Palestine because they do on a daily basis. Everything Israel is doing in this conflict is a war crime. So right off the bat, we can't legitimize a war crime by saying, well, I mean, those million people got to move. No, they don't. Those million people can't move, and they're not going to move. No one's going to open up the gates. They're not going to the Sinai. The tragic reality is those million people will die before they move. And now the question is, how much death will the world tolerate before they step in and tell Israel, enough is enough, you're done? Israel will not launch a ground incursion, a large-scale ground incursion into Gaza. They can't do it. There's American military teams right now telling them, you can't. I mean, again, the question is, it's not just a political endgame, it's a military endgame. You go into Gaza and then what? They don't have a plan. Remember, Israel was taken by surprise on October 7th. So everything that's happening right now is basically a plan they're making up on the spot. Right. They're making it up. They've done two major military exercises recently. One, Chariots of Fire last year, this year, Firm Hand. All of them were what we call stress tests. They were stress testing the entire Israeli military establishment, premised on the notion that everything went bad at once, meaning Gaza, Hamas, West Bank, Palestinian Liberation Organization, Hezbollah, Syria, and Iran. First of all, each time Israel was swamped. They couldn't handle it. But the other thing about the stress test is they never considered this. Under no circumstances in these stress tests did they ever say, okay, part of the Israeli response will be to mobilize 300,000 Israeli reserves and send them to Gaza. Right. The reserves were mobilized and sent to Lebanon to fight Hezbollah. Gaza and the West Bank were considered to be police actions against militants, against terrorists, but not an outright war. So whatever war plan Israel had has been shredded, thrown away, and they're making it up as they go along, which means they don't have a clue what they're doing. And that's what's driving the Americans crazy, because Israel's saying, we're going to go into Gaza, and America's saying, wait, what's your plan?
Right.
What are you going to do, Israel, now that you locked in 300,000 troops to Gaza when Hezbollah comes across the border up north? Right. Because in your real war plan, which we coordinated with you, you had most of your forces up there. And I tend to believe in the war game, you lost, because Hezbollah has all these missiles. They swamped your air defense. They blew up your cities. They blew up your military bases, and they seized northern Israel. So now you won't have any forces up there. And if you take a look at what's happening right now, the Israeli armor units up there, they're almost in revolt because Hezbollah is picking their tanks off one by one by one. I think it's 22 Merkava tanks have been blown up so far. And when I say blown up, that means dead crew members. Hezbollah is suffering casualties too. Israel's responding back. But my point is, this is not an invincible Israeli army. Right. This is an army that Hezbollah has been studying the fight for continuously since 2006 when they last beat Israel. Israel's army today is an army of soft people who join. They don't train hard. I mean, you're getting reservist generals coming in saying they don't know how to clean their weapons. They're not motivated. These guys would give them equipment. They don't wear it right. They're not in physical condition. I was talking to a Russian colonel who was talking about urban warfare, the Russian lessons from Mariupol and Bakhmut. He said, the first thing is you have to be extraordinarily fit to do this. Right. Because you're wearing around 50, 60 pounds worth of combat kit. Right. And if you're not wearing it, you're going to die. Right. Because you're going to get hit in the head. You're going to get hit in the chest. You're going to get hit in the groin, in the back. And if you're not wearing this gear, you're dead. This way, you might get knocked down. You might get wounded, but at least you'll be alive. But you got to wear the gear. He said, in running across, because you don't walk, running from point A to point B, constantly getting up, getting down. He says, if you're not training for this, you're in trouble. He said, we had to take our units and go out. In addition to training on tactics, we had to get them physically fit. They had to be used to wearing this stuff. The reservists right now, these are fat donut-eating boys and girls. They're not well fit. They're going to exhaust themselves. They're going to go across into Gaza, and they're going to drop like flies, not from Hamas fire, but just from heat exhaustion and the fact that they can't carry the weight. They're not conditioned to do it. They don't have the proper tactics. Again, the guy was saying, we had to learn that you don't use SWAT tactics, because everybody plays Call of Duty and every play, watches the movies. And of course, all the commandos get together at the door, and then they shotgun in and they they shoot the thing up. And he says, you do that, a drone comes in, drops a mortar on you, kills everybody.
Right.
In modern war, you're dispersed. And you have to train to do that. It's a whole new mindset of dispersal, et cetera. Israel hasn't trained to do this. So
Scott, do you think that? Do you predict that Israel will not go in with this ground invasion? Do you think that
Israel can't go in with this ground invasion? There's two reasons why. One, they're going to lose. And the Americans are telling them straight up, you're going to lose. What Israel will do is have small incursions. You'll see raids going in. But the idea of 100,000 Israeli troops lining up their tanks and going in, that isn't going to happen. Yeah. And one of the main reasons why it's not going to happen is America's saying, what do you do when Hezbollah comes across the border? Right. What's your plan?
Right, because you're spread too thin, right? You've got all the
not only that, but Hamas just wiped out Iron Dome. Iron Dome, they've shot all their ammunition. There's no ammunition left. They're begging America for more. We gave them the last 360 odd rounds we have. We've got nothing left. We're trying to produce it, but you can't produce it overnight. And there's 200,000 rockets in Hezbollah's arsenal. 200,000. Let's say Israel has 3,000 interceptors left. Hezbollah simply fires 3,000 rockets. Israel expends everything. Now they have 197,000 more that'll come in and hit Israel without any defense. Nothing.
هل أنت من البنائين الأحرار؟ هل أنت ماسوني؟ بشرفك، هلق أنت جاي من اليمن وجاي تعمل لي مسرحيات وكذا؟ يا زلمي، لك روح العب لك شغلة ثاني. أنا عم بسألك سؤال وكذا. ماسوني، أنا ماسوني وصهيوني وسلفي وبراغماتي وحنفركوشي وشنكليشي وحنكليشي وقنطريشي. بدك غير هيك؟ وصهيوني.
الآن
أوكي؟
نبدأ
وبعصي.
نبدأ مثلا.
يلا جاوب على سؤالي.
أوكي.